public inquiry from the new Education Committee in the House of Representatives. I want to declare open the public hearing of the Standing Committee on Education's inquiry into building Asia capability in Australia through the education system and beyond. I acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples as the traditional owners of the Canberra area, pay respect to elders past and present of all Australia's Indigenous peoples. This hearing will be broadcast and the transcript of proceedings will be published on the Parliament's website. I invite members of the committee to introduce themselves. Maybe we start from the far end.
That's you, Kate. Kate Chaney, independent member for Curtin in Western Australia.
And Zoe McKenzie, member for Flinders in Victoria.
I'm Karina Gallant, I'm the member for Chisholm in Victoria.
Welcome to us.
Sam Burrell, member for Nichols in Northern Victoria and Shadow Assistant Minister for Regional Education.
Z Soon, the member for Banks in southwestern Sydney.
Joanne Ryan, member for Lawler, Western Melbourne.
Tracy Roberts, member for Pearce, Western Australia.
And I'm Tim Watts, member for Gellibrand, and the chair of the committee, Renee. You're on the wrong side, mate.
I know, there's not enough chairs on that side. I'm Renee Coffey, member for Griffith in Brisbane.
You're welcome on our side of the team.
Thank you.
We're all on the same team here. Okay. I now welcome representatives from the Department of Education to give evidence today. And for the Hansard record, would you please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee?
Yeah, I'll start. So I'm Amy Forbes and I'm the Acting Assistant Secretary of the Curriculum and Learning Branch.
Shane Samuelson, the Acting First Assistant Secretary in the Teaching, Learning and Youth Division in the Schools Group.
Hi, I'm Jessica Hartman and I head up the Higher Education Assurance Branch in Herrie.
Good morning, Simon Moore, Assistant Secretary of National Security and Resilience Branch, Department of Education.
Wonderful. Well, this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament and has the same standing as proceedings of the House. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Can I ask our witnesses today whether you would like to give an opening statement before we proceed to discussion?
No, we don't have an opening statement.
Okay. I will exercise my prerogative as chair to ask some opening questions, then I will throw it open to members. I propose to alternate the call between government, opposition and crossbench members. But if you want to grab my attention or text me more surreptitiously, I will add you to the speaking list. Can I start with a big picture question and just ask, is it a Commonwealth Government objective to boost Asia capability of Australians through our education system?
It is. All successive governments have recognised the benefits of increasing Australia's knowledge and appreciation of Asian cultural understanding and languages, becoming more Asia literate by broadening and understanding the cultures and the languages is fundamental to building stronger connections and partnerships across the region. And so within the Department of Education, we do that through the schools area, through the higher education area, and particularly through the also through the international area.
Okay. Well, you're obviously aware of the concerning statistics about the decline in Asian languages studied in Australian schools over time. So to take one example, since 2010, the number of Year 12 students enrolled in Indonesian Bahasa studies nationwide has dropped from over 1,160 students to just 524 students in 2023. In Victoria, the number of high schools teaching Bahasa Indonesia has declined by 65% between 2005 and 2024, from 116 schools to 44 schools. In Queensland, stakeholders have told us that Bahasa Indonesia is functionally extinct, 2 schools teaching it in the whole state. Does the Commonwealth Department of Education track these trends in Asian language learning, or trends in the number of students tracking these languages, the number of schools teaching them?
We don't track the numbers of students participating. The data in the national level is not very good. We have data from ACARA on Year 12 student subject enrolment in languages other than English, and we can get a picture from that. So you're right, there's been steady decline in the uptake of languages by senior secondary students. So, for example, in 2010, it was around 11.3% of senior students were taking some foreign language, and it's dropped down to 7.6% in 2023. This is similar to data that we got through a piece of work that we commissioned from the Australian Federation of Modern Language Teachers Association. It's a bit of a mouthful, that acronym. I can just call it the Modern Languages Teachers Association. Very comprehensive reports that are available on the website. They showed that whereas there's about a 70% participation in languages in the primary school years, that declines dramatically once it's no longer mandatory. So there's different jurisdictions have different regulations around whether foreign languages are mandatory in primary and lower secondary school. So if you have around 70% in primary schools in government schools in 2021, that dropped to about 13% in the lower secondary schools, and then again, similar to the ACARA data, down to about 8.4% in senior secondary. So the moment it becomes optional, students generally tend to take the choice to drop out of language learning in those final 2 years of school. The Modern Languages Teachers Association thought that it was perhaps because of poor experience in language learning in the primary and lower secondary school, so they might not have had a great experience in their compulsory language learning. And so there needs to be a lot more work in trying to encourage students to stay and understand the value of learning a foreign language as part of their school education. And that also goes to one of the other structural barriers, I think, that's in the school education system, whereas there's not enough qualified language teachers in the sector. And so, for example, we don't have data down to specific languages, but the data from the Australian Teacher Workforce data set teacher survey shows that in 2023, 32% of secondary school teachers were teaching languages other than English, who were teaching languages other than English, were teaching out of field. So that means that out of field means that when they did their initial teacher education training, they didn't even do one course of that language in university. So if you were a maths teacher teaching out of field, you didn't even do one subject in maths while you were at university. So it means if you're a French teacher, you maybe didn't even cover one subject in French while you're at university. So that's 32% who are teaching out of field. And so that goes to the quality of teachers. And it's a bit of a chicken and egg trying to get kids to go through senior secondary, go into higher education, study languages in university, do the initial teacher education, and then go into the field and teach and then improve the quality of the language learning, and then kids become more encouraged to stay.
Mm-hmm. So. And it's fair to say that there are specific challenges with Asian languages more broadly, in that it's easier to find qualified teachers in, let's say, European languages, French, Italian, Spanish, than the languages that are identified in the curriculum as priority Asian languages.
The top three languages at the moment are there's Japanese, Chinese, Mandarin and French. So those are the top three languages studied at the moment in senior secondary. I'm
talking about the availability of teachers, not about student numbers.
Yeah, and I don't have that data, sorry.
Yeah. So we don't really know, do we?
We don't know
how many Australian schools have closed Asian language offerings in the last 10 years.
No.
At a primary school level, at a secondary school level.
No.
Okay. Are we concerned about this decline?
We're definitely concerned about maintaining high levels of foreign language learning in all the schools.
Asian languages specifically.
But Asian languages specific. We're somewhat agnostic at this moment in terms of languages, but given the position we are in the Asian region, obviously the Asian languages has always had a high focus in the education sphere.
Okay. Well, I mean, I hear the agnosticism. Let me ask, in recommendation 1 of the Moore report, Australia's Southeast Asia Economic Strategy to 2040 called for a whole-of-nation plan to boost Southeast Asian literacy. That would include the Indonesian figures that I discussed earlier. What is the national coordination mechanism for a strategy in Australia's education system to build?
We don't actually have a strategy, but the Australian curriculum is probably the key enabler in terms of not just teaching languages, but also teaching an understanding of Asia and Australia's engagement with Asia. So in the Australian curriculum, 6 out of the 14 languages are Asian languages. So you've got Chinese, Mandarin, Hindi, Indonesian, Japanese, Korean and Vietnamese. So those are the ones that are embedded in the Australian curriculum. The states and territories themselves determine which of those languages they will teach in their schools, so it's not up to anyone other than themselves to determine which language they wish to deliver. And they also can choose other languages. So New South Wales, for example, I think teaches Tamil, Tamil, as well as some other languages, just in response to the local environment and population of where schools are. But there's a lot of variability across the jurisdictions in terms of what languages are particularly taught. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not really possible to say that we're prioritising Asian languages if we're not measuring, and we can't improve what we're not measuring.
Yeah, we don't have the data at the national level.
Yeah, okay. One more just question on the school system, and then I'll throw to colleagues. Just in a coordination sense, I fully appreciate how hard this challenge is, and our federation is a special thing. But coordination between levels of schooling. In Canberra, there is a disconnect between the best high school Bahasa program, so the strongest Indonesian program zoned in the inner north and south Canberra, where the only current senior secondary college program is zoned for suburbs in northwest Canberra. That's the same story in my hometown in Melbourne. Is there really no mechanism to try and join up what is taught at primary school and at secondary school?
Not at the national level, no. That's a matter for the states and territories and the non-government sectors to determine.
Sure. As funders, does it make sense? I mean, this feels like squandered resource. If we're funding language learning at primary school and there's no pathway to continue it. My kids went to a bilingual Vietnamese English primary school that now teaches Italian because there were no teachers left that taught Vietnamese. But there was no high school that they can continue Vietnamese. Does that make sense for a use of Commonwealth money? I mean, it seems like wasted resource.
No response to that, sorry.
Okay, so we don't think about something like Mandarin, which requires decades of learning. The idea that we could study, put years of study in at a primary school and not continue it at high school isn't something that is a concern of the federal government.
I mean, it is a concern of the federal government, but we don't have any jurisdiction over what the states and territories deliver within their school systems.
Mm-hmm. So it's fair to say there's no levers that to make that happen.
No.
Okay. Deputy Chair.
Thank you. Given the answer you've given to the chair, it might be difficult for you to answer this in terms of the lack of data, but I was interested to see if there was I get that there's a drop in people studying a foreign language in the first place, but whether there was, if there's a steeper drop in Asian languages than European languages, or do you have that data?
I think we do probably have a breakdown of the...
Don't have a breakdown of the difference between Asian languages and other languages in terms of the drop-off.
That's okay. Just to maybe assist the question a bit. I mean, as more schools, and particularly anecdotally in the 90s, started to offer Asian languages such as the Indonesian and Mandarin, other Asian languages, which in general terms are possibly more complex for an English-speaking person to learn than French or German or Spanish. Has that contributed to people not wanting to study another language because it's more difficult? Is that an experience that you think it happens?
I couldn't speak for everyone, but it does sound like a sensible experience. I think in terms of data about the drop-off, we actually do have something that ACARA has been able to provide. Looking at the percentage of students learning a language other than English in Year 12, we do see that there is a drop in different languages. I can walk you through each language, or I can provide this on notice, but if we just look at the percentage of Year 12 students in languages other than English enrolments in 2013, 2018 and 2023 as percentages, If we compare, I'm just doing a quick look. If we compare, for example, Chinese with, these are all quite low, but Chinese with Italian, just for my ease, in 2013 there was a Year 12 enrolment of 19.1%, which grew, which reduced into 2023 at 17.4%.
In Chinese?
In Chinese, that is right. And then in Italian, we had it at 9.4% in 2013, which reduced to 7.6% in 2023. Happy to provide this table.
Yeah,
I think me rattling them off isn't that helpful, but we can definitely give that.
By contrast, the Japanese increased from 19.7% to 22.6% over that period of time.
Two more questions for me, Chair. Then you can, someone else can have a chance. I don't expect you might have data on this, but I'm just interested in your insight whether people are not studying foreign languages as much because of the ubiquity of English around the world is perhaps more than was thought 20 years ago or 25 years ago.
Well, in comparison to the OECD data, it shows that in comparison to other OECD participants in the PISA data, that only 38% of Australian students indicated they were speaking two or more foreign languages compared to the OECD average of 68%. So that really shows the gap in Australia's approach to multilingual education relative to other OECD countries. But if you could look at the majority of OECD countries are European, so they're very close to each other and they often will speak a number of languages. Whereas in Australia, yes, the English is ubiquitous. Yeah.
One more question from me in relation to using the tool of having your ATAR, advantaging your ATAR if you've got if you've got one of your Year 12 subjects as a foreign language. I think that's been around even before there was an ATAR, back when there was the old system that I did. Do you believe that works in encouraging people to study foreign languages? And is the system similar around Australia and all of the states as to how they calculate?
We don't have any evidence. I don't think there's been any research, but anecdotally, because it's no longer mandatory when you're in senior secondary, and often languages are perceived to be difficult, and therefore students may be choosing an easier subject in their final 2 years to make sure that they get a higher ATAR for their entry into university. But I don't have any research or evidence.
But what I was getting at is that your ATAR or your university entrance before ATAR has I think it's always had some form of loading. If you did it, has that? I'm just wondering if there's an insight into whether that encourages people and as an incentive, and whether that system is the same around. Is an ATAR in New South Wales the same?
Higher Education has done any work in the ATARs?
But I know exactly what you're talking about because I have a daughter in Year 12, so I know what you're talking about. But we haven't done any work on the correlation between, a loading for languages and more students studying languages.
Yeah. Okay.
Anecdotally, having been in the state sector for decades, yes, the 10% loading increased the number of students studying a language in senior school. It also increased parental interest in Saturday school languages.
That's all from me. Chair.
Thank you, Deputy.
Thank you.
Mr. Sane?
Thank you, Chair. Ms Samuelson, in your response earlier to the Chair and the Deputy Chair's questions, you kind of touched on some of the barriers to engagement with language learning more broadly. Would you mind just talking through a little bit more about any analysis or research that the department has done around the barriers? And then, I guess, linked to that, I know the Australian government has a number of initiatives around supporting language engagement, particularly Asian language capability as well. Can you just talk us through then also some of these programs and the relative success of them to date in terms of achieving that engagement, Asian capability engagement, but also language development?
There hasn't been any specific research done on the barriers, so this is just a case of looking at the various research and data and looking at things, for example, like teacher workforce shortages and where there are areas of shortages, and coming to a conclusion that probably that is a contributing factor. For example, the fact that teachers teaching out of field is often shown to have poorer quality teaching, and therefore children and young people don't have as strong outcomes. So that would be seen as one of the barriers. The ways in which some of the things that we've done to address some of the issues around trying to get more teachers into the workforce, and particularly there's an example of getting people into the accelerated masters programs, where we have employment pathways so that we can actually get really experienced people into teaching as quickly as possible, and hopefully people with a background in some kind of language learning or cultural understanding. So there's the High Achieving Teachers program. So we've just entered into phase 2 under the National Teacher Workforce Action Plan. We entered into the second phase of the HAT program, it's called, and we've got 10 providers participating in that particular program. One of them, Western Sydney University, is doing a pilot, for example, that it's looking at developing primary and secondary school teachers from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds who can teach in schools identified as hardest to staff in the Western Sydney area. And students in that particular program receive a bursary of $10,000 per year of study, and they're supported then to take up employment opportunities within that region, and also to participate in their professional experience once they've been notionally accredited by the New South Wales Teacher Regulatory Authority. So that's an example of a program where we're trying to bring people into the teacher workforce with all of that wealth of knowledge, having worked. They're often mid-career people and they're thinking about a change and want to move into teaching. And so trying to tap into some of the people who have that sort of language background, I think, would be really valuable in improving Asian cultural literacy and language learning.
I'll go Zoe, then Karina, then Kate.
Just in terms of language learning and the underpinning of why we try and have it in the curriculum, are we focused on utility as an ability to speak when overseas or in business contexts for Australia, or utility in terms of brain health, dexterity, what language learning actually does to one's cognitive capability?
It's a bit of both, actually. I mean, the Australian curriculum has got various language learning areas. It's got 8 learning areas, and languages is one of them. The other thing to keep in mind with the Australian curriculum, it also has a small number of cross-curriculum priorities. And so the importance of Asia and Australia's engagement with the region is recognised in the Australian curriculum as one of those cross-curriculum priorities. So that particular one covers things like knowing Asia and its diversity, understanding Asia's global significance, growing Asia, Australia engagement. So teachers then can get guidance from ACARA on how to integrate that in when they're learning about history, when they're learning about social sciences, when they're learning about a whole heap of different topic areas. They can integrate this sort of understanding about how Australia engages with Asia. There's also a general capability in the Australian curriculum about intercultural understanding, and that's more around some of those soft skills plus some of the knowledge that we expect children and young people to learn through schooling to actually be able to operate well in the world, basically. And the intercultural understanding helps students develop the knowledge and skills that they need to reflect on their culture and the cultural diversity around them, and therefore engage with cultural and linguistic diversity and navigate those intercultural contexts. So the curriculum is not just preparing people for the future in terms of future training, higher education or employment, but it's also trying to get well-rounded people, young people.
And if we accept that there's a cognitive dividend from language learning, I expect we also accept that it doesn't really matter what language you're learning. Possibly, if you're putting a focus on it.
Yeah, but I mean, if you take the economic context, then obviously from where Australia is located in Asia, then from an economic context, the Asian languages are particularly important.
And then would you more highly rank an ability to understand the structure and basic tenets of a language, any language, as being better than possibly a useful Asian language to grade 6, or any language mastered up until year 12? Which one would you give a higher priority to?
I don't have a priority on those. No.
Has anyone done work like that and actually studied
No,
the dividend?
not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
No.
It'd be nice for somebody to do it. And do we have a visa category that's specifically about language teachers or language assistants?
We do have a visa category for teachers, but I'd have to actually take that on notice, whether we've got one for language proficiency. Or do you know?
No, he doesn't.
Right, that's all for me.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. That's right. No, that's right. I think it's probably some variability between states and territories on this one, so I accept if you don't necessarily have all the answers. But when language curriculums are being put together and decisions are being made, I suppose, in the broader curriculum at schools, and this kind of goes beyond just the Asian languages, about how much time is dedicated to teaching language, and I also accept not every school offers languages. How does Australia compare with other OECD nations in terms of how we are prioritising general language learning in classrooms?
We don't have an international comparison. We do have some information about what is required in each of the number of hours, etc. What we appear to, we've picked up through public information, but I'm not aware of any international comparisons that are available now. But the OECD is currently doing a study looking at language proficiency.
Okay.
And the Deputy Secretary and I were involved in a preliminary interview a couple of months ago. So there will be some work coming out of the OECD in that area, but I'm not sure exactly where it's going to land. Yeah. But I think may cover some of those areas.
Yeah, because I guess part of my question is, just anecdotally understanding other education systems around the world, that there seems to be a lot more time spent on, for instance, learning English in classrooms. That's much more embedded and integrated across curriculum. I know not every school offers a language at all in Australia. I guess that research sounds very interesting because I think there probably is research that shows how many hours you need to be exposed to something to become fluent.
We'll have a look at it and see if we can get something. We haven't provided you our submission yet, so we'll have a look into that and see if we can find some international comparisons on the extent to which Australia devotes to language learning in schools versus other countries in the OECD.
Yeah, and then I guess then from there we can obviously look at the data between the Asian and non-Asian languages. And I guess that kind of goes to the comments that were being made before around that kind of cross-curriculum learning and how we embed some of that teaching, because obviously, learning about culture is not always the same as learning language.
No.
And I guess, what are the objectives with both of them, and they might have different objectives too in terms of, to go to Ms Mackenzie's question around, proficiency, or is it about cognitive development? Is it about both? And how do those decisions get made in terms of where the priorities might be for someone designing a school curriculum? So that's why I guess I'd be interested in.
Yeah, we'll have a look into it.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'm interested in understanding more about what research the department's done into the drivers for the drop in language study. And it sounds like there are some supply drivers in terms of access to teachers, but also some demand drivers with kids not speaking foreign languages at home as much, or ATAR factors. What about technology? Well, firstly, my broad question is, has the department looked into why there might be less demand for those languages or not? And do you think technology plays a role too, that you can plug anything into Google Translate, which undermines the perceived value of being able to do that without a computer?
So the former government funded in 2019 the Modern Languages Teacher Association to do to look into quite language learning in depth in school education, and so they actually have. If you go to their website, they've actually got quite a detailed. They've got 3 papers. They've got they've got a discussion paper, and then they've also had a detailed report on the state of language learning in Australia. So it's a little bit old, but it's probably based on about 2021 data, so it's not that old. And they also, as part of that, they developed a draft national languages strategy and plan to inform language teaching in Australia. So that work was, as I said, commissioned back in 2019, and it provides some really, really comprehensive data on language learning. That's the only research that I'm aware of that we've commissioned within the department.
Right, in terms of, and so that goes into what's driving a
Some
decline.
of the driving factors, etc. Yeah.
What was it called again?
It's the Australian Federation of Modern Languages Teachers Association. If you go to that website, and there's a link that goes directly to the strategy and the plan, but I can't remember what the link is off the top of my head. But you'll find it quite easily.
Ask for that on
But
those
we
just to
can
share
provide
the
it to
evidence
you.
base.
Yeah, we can provide you a
of the
copy of
committee.
all of the reports, definitely.
And so that'd be the most recent
That'd be the
analysis
most recent
on
data,
drivers of the
yeah.
decline.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you read out a few, if that can be tabled that as well, because it sounded from what you were reading out that there may be no greater decline in Asian languages than there is in European languages.
The data that Amy read out, the numbers are really, like the top numbers in terms of, like, if you look at participation, is Japanese 22.6, up from 19.7,
Right.
and then Chinese was, the next highest is French at 19.3, and then you've got Chinese at 17.4, and then the numbers after that are very, very small. The next largest number after that is Italian at 7.6, so they're very small.
And was French up or
proportions.
down to 19.3?
Sorry, I'll just put my glasses on here. So the Japanese went from 19.7 to 21.4 in 2018, and then 22.6 in 2023. And then the French actually has dropped. It went from 20.9 in 2013, 17.9 in 2018, and then down to up a little bit again in 2023 to 19.3.
Okay, so based on that, it doesn't seem like there's a difference between Asian languages and European
But
languages.
the rest of the languages are quite small. They're in single figures.
And with the cross curriculum priority, how does that manifest, I guess?
So that's very much up to, CARA provides guidance, and it would probably be a really good idea to ask CARA to come and present at the committee, I think. CARA provides guidance on how to incorporate the cross-curriculum priority areas in each of the different learning areas. And then it's very much up to the teachers to actually decide when and how to incorporate that, because some of that can be quite challenging things. So there's things that you'd incorporate in, the primary school years and the middle years and the higher years. But as I said, it's very much up to the teachers to take that information and think about how to embed it in their lesson plans when they're planning for each lesson.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Coffey?
Thanks. I had a question around immersion programs where students learn other areas of the curriculum in a foreign language. I know we've got a state school in my community, not in an Asian language, in French. Does the department collect data on how many schools offer immersion programs, and also what the mechanism is for them to be able to take that on? Is there a certain framework they work within?
We don't have that data, no. They'd be registered under the state authority.
Yeah. Anecdotally, would you have a sense of how many schools offer immersion?
Not off the top of my head, no. I know there are a few sort of concentration language schools, but we can look into it and come back to you with some information.
Thanks.
I might pick up the call again. So I just want to drill down on sort of what's being done to build the teacher supply issue. So one of the submissions to the inquiry from the ACSSO suggested that, the shortage of qualified Asian language teachers is the most significant barrier here. Schools struggle to sustain programs due to staff turnover, reliance on temporary appointments, limited pre-service preparation. So we've heard that. So the 2022 National Teacher Workforce Action Plan sets out a pathway for addressing national issues of teacher supply. The only mention I can see of languages in that plan, though, is for First Nations languages. So I just want to confirm there's not a gender item in that about Asian language capability?
Not specifically on Asian language capability, no.
So, and generally, you said not specifically Asian language.
No,
how would it be picked up in a general sense?
It'd be picked up in the sense that we're trying to increase the supply of teachers. And so through the National Teacher Workforce Action Plan, there are 27 actions. Most of them are actually being delivered or they're ongoing work. And we're actually starting to see some green shoots in terms of initial teacher education enrolments. So the commencing ITE, both domestic and international students, has increased by 14% from 2024 to 2025. Well, I think that's 2023 to 2024, sorry. And then there's preliminary data shows that there's an increase again from 2025. And we think that some of the reasons why there's been that increase is things like the increased teaching places. So through higher education, we introduced another 40,000 Commonwealth supported places. I think it's 40,000. There's the Commonwealth Teaching Scholarships. So eligible recipients get $10,000 a year for each year they're studying in an initial teacher education program. So that's quite attractive to them. Higher education areas also introduced the paid prac payments, so recognising the difficulties of students actually doing their professional experience or their pracs, and sometimes they're having to give up, like their part-time jobs, etc. So there's the paid prac payments. We had the Be That Teacher national campaign to encourage people to join the teaching profession, which appeared to be quite successful. And then there was also the HAT program is one of the other things that is part of that National Teacher Workforce Action Plan. On top of that, there's been a lot of reforms over the last couple of years around improving the quality of initial teacher education. And so the more recent reforms was around the Teacher Education Expert Panel. And one of the things that they have recommended is they noted that people aren't being very well prepared to get one for the teaching workforce. So graduates are going into the teaching workforce and finding it very confronting, and they didn't necessarily have all of the equipment in their kit, so to speak, to actually perform well in the teaching workforce. So that particular panel recommended the implementation of what we're calling core content, which goes into the sorts of things that all graduates need to know before that they enter the workforce. And those sorts of things are all actually contributing to improving the quality of the teaching programs and getting more people into teaching. So we are seeing some real, as I said, some improvements, not necessarily for Asian languages or Asian capability, but an increase in IT students will hopefully flow through to people with capability in that area.
In my experience in this Asian capability space, I mean, a lot of the programs at schools are really supported by a passionate teacher, a teacher with a vocation for this who carries the administration and the recruitment of students and really drives it from personal passion. I mean, do we have any programs designed to sort of create more gems like that? How to get more teachers getting that bug, like pre-service, post-service?
The initial teacher education reforms, I think, are really going to the heart of that. So they're really trying to make sure that students are well prepared for the classroom. They're learning the things they need to learn to actually be effective teachers. There's going to be better moderation of the teaching performance assessment. So at the end of your initial teacher education, you're assessed in terms of your teaching performance. So we've established an initial teacher education quality assurance oversight board, which is actually looking at the implementation of the core content in all the higher education provided programs, but also implementing this process to have cross-institutional moderation of the teaching performance assessments to really try and make sure that the students have got the gift of teaching. But you're right, it's like passionate teachers will tend to enthuse students, definitely.
And just so I'm clear, that's kind of equipping teachers generally with those teaching capabilities, but it's not like we're not trying to get people interested in training teachers interested in Indonesia
not
or China.
Necessarily, no.
Yeah, okay.
No.
Mr. Singh?
Thanks, Chair. A lot of the evidence suggests that early uptake of languages is potentially the most impactful way to increase engagement in additional language participation. What work's being done in the early childhood space around language uptake, language development and engagement that the department either may be supporting or may be aware of that it's worth us kind of noting?
We do actually have one program. It's our one language program that we actually deliver in the department for in the early years. It's the Early Learning Language Learning Australia, ELA, which is an app online program. It covers all 14 and 13 because one of the languages is Auslan, so it covers all of the other languages in the Australian curriculum, and it's for tiny tots. It's for the little kids. And it's apparently incredibly successful. And I think the most popular subjects through ELA are Japanese and Chinese. And the schools and the students and the teachers and the parents themselves can choose which subjects, and so the most popular are Japanese and Chinese.
Mm-hmm. So you just mentioned the success of the program. In terms of how widely it's spread, can you just give us some indication of that? Particularly given its the reflection on its effectiveness, it would be interesting to explore whether that could be extended.
Yeah, of course. So at the present, there's 5,000 eligible preschools and nearly 300 foundation to year 2 schools that participate in ELA. In 2024, we had about 34,000 children in preschool and about 18,000 children in foundation to 2 using the app. In terms of its effect...
Sorry, can I clarify, when we're saying preschool, what are we talking about?
The year before full-time school.
Okay, so we're talking about long day care as well as kindergarten.
So that is a very good
arrangements.
question. So it has to be delivered by an early childhood teacher.
Yes.
So depending on the formation of the childcare centre, so some centres have a dedicated preschool program.
All childcare centres have a dedicated
preschool
kindergarten teacher now.
Yes, but the lesson needs to be delivered by the teacher. So a teacher has to be on the premises, but the lesson for Ella to be eligible needs to be delivered by a preschool teacher. So there's availability of them in a childcare setting, but in a dedicated preschool, of course, and then a foundation through to 2, that's obviously in a school setting.
Deputy Chair.
Thank you. Back in the olden days when I was in school, people wanted to learn foreign languages that weren't available in the school with a teacher. They did it by correspondence. Now, technology has significantly improved since those days. And are we taking full advantage of the, I'll say tele-education, which is paraphrasing telehealth, but using those link-ups that we can have now, are we fully taking advantage of those in offering a wide range of languages to students without necessarily having to have a native speaker or a teacher, a specific teacher embedded physically and personally in the school?
I couldn't say whether that's the case, again, because it goes down to the states and territories and the non-government sectors as to how they're delivering it. I imagine they are using the technologies. Maybe in higher education there's probably a bit more of that sharing of the expertise across institutions.
I'm not aware whether there is in the higher education space in terms of the way that it's taught, so I can't comment on that, sorry.
I'll go to Ms Garland, and then we're scheduled to finish at 1:45, and I will come back with some questions on higher education after Dr Garland's questions.
Great. So I've got some questions on higher education too, turns out. So I've got 2 questions, they're connected. Firstly, what the data would be on people learning languages at university, and obviously for the purposes of this inquiry, specifically Asian languages. And then whether there is any kind of outreach with those students who are learning languages to encourage them to perhaps do a Masters of Education or any other kind of, double degree, or consider making teaching their profession.
So on the first one we do, so I do have some numbers on across different language groups. Yeah. So, Northern European, I've also got the Southern Asian, Southeast Asian languages. So I've got those trends and across the board, and I think you guys know this already, that there has been a decline in students studying language at university, but it differs by language. So we do have those numbers. The second part of your question about then, do we encourage as a department sort of uptake of further study? That's not something that we sort of, as a government agency sort of play a role in. So we, put that responsibility on the institutions, on the universities, in terms of how they structure their course offering in line with student demand. And, a lot of what we're seeing in the languages reflects that decline in demand for studying languages.
I want to go to this demand question and sort of get your view on that, the tension between demand-driven higher education system and what we all recognise is an important national interest in having a sovereign capability of being able to understand our region and having institutions that are able to train Australians to understand the region, so perpetuating that capability across the generations. So in the Parliament today we have the Australia-China Business Council that's downstairs. They're all talking about capability. So the Australian Academy of Humanities Australia-China Knowledge Capability Report in 2022, funded by the Australian Government, by the National Foundation for Australia-China Relations, it found that, quote, Australia has distinctive interests in relations with China which require a sovereign China knowledge capability, balancing security, politics, economics and relationship building. However, there are serious questions around our ability to generate core capability for stakeholders, direct knowledge of China, informed by world-class understanding of how China operates and engage with Australia's national interests. Stakeholders in government and universities see benefit in a greater degree of national coordination in teaching, research and the translation of research into government and industry. How do you think about this knowledge capability, this sovereign capability question? I mean, what is the level of coordination involved here? I mean, I understand it's a demand-driven sector.
Again, it comes back to, we as government don't interfere in the offerings that universities choose to make in terms of their courses. So we don't direct universities to offer certain courses. So, for our purposes, they're an autonomous institution that, make their own choices about course offerings based on student demand, and obviously a lot of that student demand will then, go to the future job market, types of jobs people want to do. So we don't interfere in that, as a government agency in directing universities on what they offer. What we do is look at, and we're setting up, we've got an interim Australian Tertiary Education Commission at the moment. Next year, subject to the passage of legislation, we're looking at making that permanent. One of the things the ATEC will do is look at the higher education sector as a whole and the sorts of choices that are being made in that sector as a whole. The role of the ATEC and, how the ATEC chooses to look at these things, that's a sort of future question. But for now, the way that we operate is that we will not, intervene in those course offerings.
If I may, beyond course offerings, generally speaking, universities are very Asia focused and very committed to engaging, having linkages with Asia. International enrolments of international students in Australian universities sit about 90% or more than 90% of international students are Asian students. You mentioned China and what's happening downstairs with China at the moment. At the moment, we have about 204,000 Chinese students in Australia, followed by India with 160,000 students in higher education and Nepal with 59,000. So fairly significant presence. As I said, it doesn't speak directly to course offerings, but in terms of people that are in our universities that can speak second languages or come from these other cultures, that is something that's quite ubiquitous across the higher education landscape in Australia.
I do understand that we're good at educating other countries, nationals. I'm talking about a sovereign capability for Australia. And I understand that we're not interfering in offerings, but talk me through the way that the Job Ready Graduates reforms work there, reducing the cost of language degrees, but not reducing the cost of language courses, subjects, but not reducing the costs of area studies courses that were the feeders into those language studies.
Yeah, so you're right. Job-ready graduates did seek to rebalance in terms of language courses. The sort of contribution that the Commonwealth was making towards those units of study. Obviously those units of study, may contribute to a different degree, like an arts degree, and so the overall cost of the degree will depend on the units of study that a student's undertaking. What we do know is that the number of students undertaking a language degree is very small, but there are students that pick units in languages that the job-ready graduate reforms were designed to then rebalance that to encourage more students to study those languages.
Mm-hmm. That's okay. We're approaching time, but just to sort of summarise, this is a mind-meltingly complex area of policy and coordination across different levels of government, different stages of education. But as it stands at the moment, there's not a federal government strategy to build Asia capability as a whole of nation level or at different stages along this development pathway. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for all the work you do on an absolutely vital area of policy for our nation. It's a challenging one.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Oh, apologies, I need to read the formalities. Thank you for your evidence today. You'll be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence and we'll have an opportunity to request corrections to transcription errors. Please send your responses to any questions taken on notice during this hearing to the Secretariat. And I think we have more written questions on notice that we will provide through that we sort of didn't get through all. Please provide responses to any questions taken on notice during this hearing to the Secretariat by close of business on Friday, 21 November 2025. I declare this hearing closed.
Thank you.